Radio. I am Kestrel, and with me for this episode is Cain.
Hello, hello, hello.
And Kate.
Yo!
And Skyler.
Hey.
And we are talking about Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, which, as you may know if you've listened to any of the past 80 episodes, is my favorite anime of all time, and many others as well. It's okay. Apparently that's
fine.
what we'll learn. It's fine.
It's no Baki, but it's fine.
2D Baki, 3D Baki, or new 2D Baki?
All.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's not nearly grotesque enough for me.
So I guess before we, scare away anyone who hasn't seen the series and thinks that we're going to spoil everything, first part of this is going to be spoiler-free. We're going to try to convince you that you should watch it, or not, if that is Kane's opinion or anyone else's. So
It's okay, you're entitled to be wrong.
Yeah, I agree. We're on the same page on this one.
Boy, do not write checks you can't cash, because I can't promise I won't accidentally spoil anything in the middle of a stream of consciousness tirade.
Well, maybe we'll keep the spoiler-free section brief then. I just want to kind of get out the general feelings of, like, why you should watch this without giving anything away, or why you shouldn't.
I could do that.
We'll see.
Probably.
I guess before we get to that, we can start just trying, kind of going around talking about our experience with the Fullmetal Alchemist franchise in general. So, like, what was your experience with the first series or the manga or just Brotherhood, if that's all you've experienced? Kate, how about you?
Oh god, I don't remember how I found out about it. I don't remember what the status of the... It was so long ago. When did it first come out? Let me look at the...
2003.
So, manga started in Japan 2001. First anime series was Japan 2003, America 2004. Not sure when Viz started bringing out the manga.
Did the...
Yeah.
What was the... When
Brotherhood was 2009 to 2010.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why, I guess I should mention this, the reason we're talking about it now is because, I did the 10th anniversary rewatch for the entire run of it, from when it premiered 10 years later in 2019 to just this past week. So that is why we're discussing it now, and Cain joined me for, like, the second half of it.
And then I raced ahead of you at the very end because I got impatient.
Which is good to hear. I'm glad you had that problem.
Impatience is good.
Yeah. So yeah, this is fresh in my mind. I mean, I've seen it 7 or 8 times. And I'm also rereading the manga because the Fullmetal editions are coming out. So I'm kind of experiencing it again through that. So it'll probably be like 10 times in the past 10 years. And then, Cain, I'll let him get to his thing, but it's also fresh in his mind. So did you figure out the timeline, Kate?
Yeah, the anime came out before the manga was released here, and it actually aired on Adult Swim starting in November 2004, and the manga was starting to be released in 2005.
Yeah, that makes sense. So were you, like, on it right from the beginning of its time in America?
Probably.
Cool.
I'm guessing. Which is weird. Which is weird because I did not have cable anymore by that point because I was out of college. So I don't know how I was watching it. Maybe I was just buying the discs when they came out, probably. Maybe.
Yeah, so those probably followed a little bit after, right? Probably like early 2005 they started.
Yeah, maybe.
The singles, anyway.
Yeah. It must have been expensive.
Yeah. I think you probably could have afforded cable TV for the same price.
Okay, so that's where you started with it, and then, so it sounds like, you've had experience with all 3. How exactly did that go?
Now I'm really trying to remember. I know I watched all of the original run of the first series, and I don't remember how I watched it. Now I'm very confused, because I'm like, I don't think I actually own the first one on disc. Maybe I do. I don't think I do, though. I know I own all of Brotherhood. I'm so
You-
confused. Maybe I was illegally streaming it.
Could you have borrowed it from someone?
Don't think so. Nobody I know watched anime.
Hmm.
Did I have? It is entirely possible I might have had a friend VHS taping it for me.
There you go.
Hell yeah.
Because I know I was definitely doing that for Inuyasha at some point, so I bet I had a bunch of episodes of Fullmetal Alchemist just taped off cable from other people's TVs too.
Nice.
A 2004 review.
Yeah, exactly.
It was a different time, man. And nobody had internet speeds or, there was a short window where it was very, very difficult to get, especially what I had to my house at that time. I think I was on DSL still at that point at home. Yeah.
How
So
many
that was-
episodes could you cram into a VHS?
On EPL, like 8 hours, so 16 episodes. That's about right?
I mean, that's not bad, really.
No.
Yeah.
The highest of quality, I'm sure.
Yeah, the worst quality because it's the one that can cram most on a VHS tape at one time. Yeah.
So then the manga came after that for you?
Yeah, and I was buying the manga from the moment it started getting released.
Okay.
So I have all the original Visvert volumes of that. And then I bought all the single disc releases of Brotherhood as they were being released.
Which, by that point, at least they had one core releases, so it wasn't like the 3-episode singles you had to get for the original series. Are you trying to tell me that I don't know the home video history of Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood?
I can't remember. I have an awful lot of discs. I have an awful lot of discs up there. How many episodes was that show?
It was five releases, 5 cores.
Oh. Were they, split into half seasons?
It was 5 releases.
I don't know, man. I feel like there was more disc sets than that, but yeah.
There were 2 discs per set, but they were, 1 set per core.
Okay. I haven't looked at my shelves upstairs in a while. I really need to redo them. They're on there somewhere.
Are those DVDs still going to be any good?
These are Blu-ray discs I think I have.
Ooh.
Maybe.
Look
Shit.
at you.
I don't know. Now I want to run upstairs and go look, and I don't. Maybe I'll take off.
Actually,
at the
with
beginning
the
of
way
the
that
discussion.
with the way that your memory is serving you right now, I wouldn't be surprised if you had laser discs somehow, and you're like, wait a minute.
Exactly.
I pressed
You have
my own
Betamax?
laser
Fullmetal
discs. I don't know
Alchemist
how this happened.
Brotherhood. FMAB
You have it on
bootleg
Betamax
laser
too?
discs.
No, sadly. He did what was that? What's the other? The HD DVD?
Mm-hmm. Yep. HD DVD.
Yeah, HD DVD. You could also have it on somehow put on film and then put on reels, and then you just have
The dream.
film canisters of anime.
Yeah. I've seen that happen before. Had to capture some video that way. Found old family tapes. I was like, hey, somebody had our home videos transferred to VHS at some point. And Dad's like, no, your grandfather shot at a wall. And then captured it onto the video camera, and I'm like, that's ghetto.
Nice.
But that's what you do.
All right. So how about you, Skyler?
Well, I first watched the original. It was my freshman year of college, and over winter break. I think so, about 7 years ago. Well, I actually watched the entire thing in one weekend.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, and right after, I watched Brotherhood, and both of them on recommendation from a friend.
Good friend.
And yeah, loved both of them. Wasn't fond of the ending to the original,
Mm-hmm.
which is why Brotherhood had hit me so hard.
Mm-hmm.
The ending of
Because
which one? Both?
Without
I don't know
spoiling
how
anything,
the first
ending
one
is great.
ends compared to the second one.
Absolutely.
I've never read the manga, but I own the DVD release of the original. Well, the Funimation version, and where they released it in 2 big sets.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Blu-ray collections, and also Funimation for Brotherhood.
Nice. All right.
Yeah,
And-
both of them are top 10 shows for me. Brotherhood is top 5.
Yeah, where exactly does it rank on your list?
Number 2, right between Steins Gate and One Piece.
Nice. Yeah, my 1 and 2 are your 2 and 3.
Mm-hmm. Excellent taste.
Cheap.
What was that, Cain?
I said sheep.
Well, I attempted to herd you. How did that go?
I mean, I liked the show. I thought it was really good. Obviously, I watched the whole thing. If I didn't, I wouldn't have watched it, and I would have just lied to you and hope you wouldn't call me out on it.
Mm.
Yeah.
But
And
I
you
did
don't
watch
commit
it.
to
I did watch it all the way to
64
the
episodes
end.
you don't like.
Yeah, no. I mean, I've done similar things, but not quite on that standpoint. I've watched like 26 episode shows I didn't like with the hope that I would like it by the end, which never happened. But yeah, 64 would be asking quite a bit. So no, I did really enjoy it. I do have some things that I didn't like about it, but I can't think of a single piece of media that I've loved every bit and can't criticize in one way, shape, or form. I don't think such a piece of media exists.
Yeah, there's definitely things I don't like about it either, but as far as anime goes, it's as close to perfect as I've experienced.
But yeah, it was super good. I wish they would make a more affordable Blu-ray of it. I think did we talk about that might be happening or is happening, but still affordable is a very flexible term? Or is that Fate Zero we talked about that is getting a new Blu-ray but still very expensive?
Fate Zero is an example of that. We can get into the home video releases a bit, but I'm hoping that since Funimation has started to do like cheaper editions of Aniplex shows now, that will kind of proliferate into classics like this, so that you can get it from Funimation again, since what's available right now are very expensive Aniplex releases.
Yeah. It's probably not too hard to find used copies of the Funimation releases.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't looked around for them because I've always had them, but I feel like that show's in such high demand that it would probably get snatched up pretty quickly.
Let's see.
Yeah, check it out. So, Cain, that was your first exposure to the franchise, period, right? Just a few months ago?
Pretty much. I mean, I'd been aware of it. I've been to conventions and seen costumes of it, and I knew it had, I think, at least one PlayStation 2 game. Mm-hmm. But I had never watched it or really knew anything about it whatsoever, other than, there was a small blonde-haired kid and then a large walking suit of armor. But this was pretty much my first foray into it as a whole.
Cool.
So, I mean, pretty successful, I'd say. I would like to read the manga, but I'm waiting for all those Fullmetal editions to come out, so I kind of know how much storage space I'm going to need for them.
Well,
I'm not super big into like generally collecting as stuff is released, only because my storage needs are always very flexible, as in I could buy something like that takes up space. So, for example, I visited my in-laws a little while ago, and they gave us this really enormous set of the Lord of the Rings books, and now it takes up most of a shelf. So that was out of nowhere. And I've tried collecting comic books before and things like that, and I got bit too many times collecting a comic book, and then the run just ends in the middle, and now I'm stuck with 12 comic books that don't have an ending. Not that would happen with this, but I always like now seeing how many volumes is it? How much space am I going to have to require?
Yeah, space management is definitely the biggest problem with collecting physical media, especially for books where, you can only make them so thin.
What is space?
Yeah.
I mean, how many volumes is Fullmetal Alchemist?
So the manga is 27 volumes, and each Fullmetal edition has 1.5 volumes. So it's going to be 18 in total. Volume 9 just came out, so I could measure how much space volumes 1 through 9 takes up and just double that to give you the exact amount it will take up.
And that's a good amount of space.
That's nothing.
It's not a short series. I mean, 27
they had
volumes
some
originally.
triple volume releases, didn't they? that were like
Not for-
mass market paperbacks.
Oh yeah, those really garbage quality ones. Yeah, that's true.
Not to
Yeah.
go away from Full Metal for a second, but I always wonder what the reading quality of that Death Note all-in-one is, because I feel like that'd be the biggest
I
pain
had
in the
it.
ass to read.
I had it, and I regretted buying it and gave it away. But yeah, it's completely not at all feasible to read that thing.
Well, I feel like the spine would bust eventually
Yeah.
because you're flipping through like 1,000+ manga pages, and it's so thick that you'd have to hold it, and it would take some decent hand strength to hold it open in the middle without it wanting to close on itself constantly.
Exactly. You have to like force down both sides with both your hands at all
How
times.
wide was that?
It was a lot thinner than you might expect. They were like really thin pages. It was a really bad release. I don't know why they
It was
did
like classic Bible pages where you could see through them.
Yeah,
Almost.
Yeah, that-
onion skin paper.
Almost, yeah.
You can't print something that big and can have any reasonable quality.
Yeah.
The pre-press technician in me was like cringing at even hearing that they did such a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have an edition of Lord of the Rings that's all 3 books in one.
Yeah, I have that
Oh.
edition too, but that's still not anywhere near as bad as that.
I do have
Yeah.
the Spice and Wolf 10th anniversary.
Oh, that makes me angry too. Especially since that's not the end of the series.
Well, yeah, but it was the end of the series for like 5 years. They didn't know.
For half a minute.
It was 5 years. Anyway, that book is awesome, except the text is like, microscopic. So fortunately I have very good eyes, so it wasn't a problem for me, but I can imagine almost anyone else having a really big problem with it. But yeah, that's 17 light novel volumes packed into a single book, which is
Right.
quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about all that. But so 18 volumes, it would take up a decent amount of space. But I would
Yeah.
like to read it sometime. I always wrestle with manga in general if I want to buy it or see if I can buy digital versions and then read them on a tablet or something. I don't like collecting digital versions of things just because I never know if I truly own it. But
Yeah.
for something like that, it's always the compromise is, well, I need to find a place to put 18 hardback manga volumes.
It's a struggle.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but at least I know I'd be getting like a quality release.
Yeah,
I'm not
they're
just
really
buying-
nice books.
Yeah, I'm not buying like mass market paperback Shonen Jump things. I'm not getting phone books.
Not buying the complete collection of One Piece.
in one book.
I feel like
Oh,
if
no, that would be... no, just no.
1,000 chapters in one book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so as far as my experience with the franchise, kind of similar to Kate starting out, I was watching it from when it was airing on Adult Swim, the first series in 2004, and watched that till it ended, loved it, got the DVDs, and I probably hadn't watched the whole series all the way through on TV at that point, so I watched all the way through a few times on the DVDs, and then was very excited when they were going to be making a new series, and didn't think that it would hold up to the original. Boy, I was wrong.
Yeah.
And it was, so that was 2009, and that was in the early days of simulcasts, so it was one of Funimation's first simulcasts. So I watched that as it came out. They were a few days after the Japanese broadcast, but it was still fine at that point. And yeah, I watched that as it came out every week, and it was just blowing away my expectations more and more. I think by the end of it, I was watching the simulcast and the Adult Swim broadcast of the dub and the Blu-ray release of the dub all at the same time. So that was kind of, a good indicator of how much I loved the series already at that point. And then, I bought all of the original 5 Blu-ray releases, obviously, and that was also fairly early in both the initial releases having, 13 episodes instead of being singles, as well as the early days of releasing everything on Blu-ray. So it was a good time for that to come out in a lot of ways. We got simulcasts, we got one core releases, and we got Blu-rays right off the bat.
Yeah, and Funimation has always been great for availability in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I got those 5 Blu-rays, and then, a few years after that, I finally got the manga, the complete box set, which is, width-wise, a lot less room than the volumes by themselves, because it's, like, double-stacked. But I have, like, a custom compartment built into one of my shelves to house that specifically, because it's very tall. It won't fit on any normal shelf. But that was a nice box set, and then I read through all of that in, a few weeks once I got it one summer. And then the Aniplex releases started coming out a few years ago, and those were just 2 sets for the whole show, and very nice, so I bought those. And I got the 10th anniversary Japanese Blu-ray box, which doesn't even have a dub or subtitles, but I got it anyway because I love it. And I bought all of the soundtrack CDs, and I'm getting the Fullmetal editions now. Those started a few years ago as well. It's one of the series, as well as owning the anime 3 times and the soundtracks twice, because the Blu-ray box came with the soundtracks too. I will also own the manga twice, which I don't for many series, but, I already had the box set, and these are super nice editions, so it's not like any really disposable versions that I could be enticed to get rid of. So, I own the series about 5 times, and have watched the first series, I'm not sure how many times at this point, because, that was like 16 years ago. So, a few times, maybe 5 times. And I got the Funimation big Blu-ray box of that series when they released that a few years ago before they lost the license. So I own that series twice. So I guess I own 7 versions of the Fullmetal Alchemist series.
Jesus Christ.
Or no, I got rid of the DVDs for the first series, so 6. Anyway, so I rewatched that when the Blu-rays came out. So yeah, probably about 5 times for that. 7 or 8 for Brotherhood. And now I'm reading through the manga a second time around, and about halfway through that. And yeah, it has been my favorite anime for most of the past 10 years. So it's definitely something that I have probably talked about in most of the episodes of this podcast, and have talked about whenever I've gotten the chance. I wrote the 10 years later article on our site for it, and went into, a fraction of what I wanted to say about it. So check that out if you're interested. That's also spoiler-free. And also, just in general, I have kind of made it my life purpose for basically the past 10 years to introduce people to anime in general, especially, my favorites. And so this is inevitably the series that I have introduced to the most people. Also because, as I'm sure we'll discuss, it is extremely accessible to virtually anyone. It's a really easy sell, even if someone's not into anime. So, yeah, I've had great success with introducing people to it, whether they were into anime yet or not. And a lot of them got into anime because of it and enjoyed other stuff afterwards. So that's all made me very happy. And obviously I continue to do so, as I have been bugging DJ to watch it for the past several years, and managed to get Cain to do so. So
I don't think DJ's ever going to watch that.
I don't know. His girlfriend's trying to make him, so she has more sway than I do.
Mm-hmm. You conspire with her to tie him down.
Yeah, that's what I was working on it. I had never spoken to her before, but after hearing that she tried to get him to watch it, I just immediately started talking to her about it. I was like, how do we make this happen? So hopefully soon. So Kate, did you check your discs?
Yeah, there were 5 of them, and there are Blu-rays I own, so...
I know there were 5 of them, Kate.
Yeah. But... I was wrong to distrust you on that matter.
I'll give you $5 for that.
All right.
They're collecting dust on my bookshelves.
So $5 sounds good to me.
Yeah, there you go.
I'll even pay shipping.
Buy case copies, perfect.
No.
So Cain, you just watched this for the first time. let's hear some spoiler-free thoughts on why someone should or shouldn't watch it.
I think the biggest thing that I enjoyed was that the world is really well made. Like, it has a very clear, at least in my opinion, established like rules and how things kind of work and a socioeconomic structure, and things like that. Like, you don't get not all anime will give you a very well-crafted world, especially if they just want you to focus kind of on the characters and their struggles and not so much the outside, the externalities that affect them. But I always enjoyed how much thought was put into developing not only, and this is where my forgetting of names is going to start kicking in, but the nation that Ed lived in, was it Armistice, something like that?
Amestris.
I can't remember that one. But yeah, basically the two nations, so the Ishvalans and Germany. So, and how they develop both of those nations and the cultures and the reasons behind how the war started and everything. It wasn't just, here's this one, here's that one, there was a war, and that's all you're going to know about it. So that's my big thing. And it has a lot of really well written characters. I don't like how some of the characters got treated eventually in multiple different ways, which I'm sure I'll talk about later. But it also has a really strong cast, and I think you would be really hard pressed to not find someone that you could relate to or like in some way. So I think that's basically it, really. And of course, it's got really cool action and magic, and there's blood, especially towards the end. So that's what I like. So I would recommend it wholeheartedly, any day of the week. Just don't buy it unless you want to drop some serious coin.
Yeah, I mean, the Aniplex releases are expensive, but like for 64 episodes for Aniplex, I feel like it's not that bad compared to most of their stuff. How much is it per set? It's been a while since I bought them.
Last time I looked with any like true interest, it was around Otakon of last year, because I was just looking at Blu-rays and I think they wanted like $250 per set.
What? No, it's not $250
that may be,
per set. Maybe $250 for both.
Well, this is also at a con, so they're probably trying to get you for MSRP.
$250 per set would be a lot even by Aniplex standards.
I wouldn't be surprised by Aniplex standards for 64 episodes, but I know I'm sure it was around 100 per set. 125, 150 maybe, but certainly not upwards of 200.
Yeah, like I said, it was quite a while ago.
It's worth mentioning, especially to people who haven't seen it before. It is extremely available on streaming services. It's on, Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max, Crunchyroll, Funimation, pretty much anywhere you can imagine it streaming. It is available in its entirety in either Japanese, English, or both, and both are excellent. So definitely check that out if you haven't.
It looks like Right Stuff is charging 100 per set. Yeah,
that's what I thought, and that's like the amount that you're going to pay, because Aniplex stuff is just their standard price through Right Stuff. The MSRP is just there to make you feel like you saved money. So it's 125 MSRP anyway, so it wouldn't possibly be more than 250 per set, but 200 total, 200 for both. 200.
I actually did buy a DVD set once. I bought a DVD set once on a whim from a video game store, but it was only so I could trade it for a copy of some PlayStation 4 game. I traded it for beer. That's what I did.
You bought a DVD set of this series and never watched it? Oh.
No, it was the second set, and I knew one of my friends really liked it. So I texted him and was like, do you want this? And he said, yeah, I'll take it. I don't have the second set of it, like this, I guess it was a thicker, like thin pack. I can't remember.
Yeah, I know the set you're talking about.
Yeah, and so then he bought me some beer, so we just traded. So I did actually purchase Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood at one point in time before I even watched it.
Okay, how about you, Skyler? What's your spoiler-free opinion on the series and why people should watch it?
Spoiler-free. It's basically a top-tier fantasy all around. What I especially love is how well put together the plot is. Every detail was laid out very thoroughly early on without feeling like it's just spinning its wheels on setup, and everything that happens has some form of payoff. It all connects together at the end. There's a lot going on, but the way it works, it just fits in a way that stories with that much happening, I think, sometimes struggle to do. I can't think of any plotline or character in it that felt wasted or I wasn't completely invested in. It just, like I said at the beginning, just how well put together it is. This is what that draws me to it. And plus, for Brotherhood, it's an excellent production.
Mm-hmm.
And a little over a decade old now. The animation still looks great. Fantastic soundtrack.
Yeah.
I believe it has a lot of the big name animators who still work with Bones today.
Yeah, definitely. Which, I mean, the first series had some of that too, so, every animated version of Fullmetal Alchemist has been by Bones, and they have some of the best animators in the industry. And, the first series had some really incredible, action choreography at times. It just, and I talked about this in my article as well, it doesn't, it's an early DigiPaint show. It's not native high def. It's not as clean and polished as Brotherhood. So, there's some really good technical achievements in it, but those extra 6 years just really let Brotherhood shine.
Yeah. In the original, one way I think it actually surpasses Brotherhood sometimes is the sense of atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
From the lighting and the more low-key soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
Brotherhood is a big, epic orchestra, which fits the kind of show. Oh, it is.
Yeah.
2003, he is more quiet and dramatic.
Yeah, I agree with that. They definitely have kind of different themes and different intentions with their tone.
Yeah, but both fit the story they're in.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, the two just have very different priorities.
Yeah, so for those who aren't familiar with the first series and how it differs, it was an interesting scenario where they started the anime adaptation not long after the manga had started. The manga was monthly. They needed to produce weekly episodes of the anime. So they knew right from the beginning they were going to have to diverge entirely. So the first two cores of the first series, basically cover what the first 1/5, which is the first core of Brotherhood, cover. And, it is obviously much more stretched out, and they take a lot of liberties because they're setting up for the changes they know they need to make once it's got to switch to being a completely original story. So, they start from the same basis, but halfway through it becomes completely new. And it's interesting to see some of the things that they tie together in that series that were never really meant to tie together that way. Definitely some creative choices, but I will say for sure, agreeing with what Skyler was saying earlier, was that it's so clear looking at the endings of the two that Brotherhood is the natural conclusion that everything was leading to, and it's so satisfying with how it pays everything off. Whereas the first series is kind of, really? You're going to pretend this is where you're heading from the beginning? It's, I don't know, not quite there. I will say, sorry.
out of place in the world
Yeah.
that we were given at the start.
Right, exactly. Like, clearly this was not what this was meant to build up to.
Yeah. Brotherhood gives the impression that everything was planned out from the start,
Right.
or at least the important points.
Definitely, which makes sense. Because, the manga had nearly concluded at the time. That's another interesting thing that happened, was that they were making Brotherhood pretty much right up to the end of the manga and timed them to conclude almost simultaneously. Which is very exciting, because, it's everyone kind of experiences the ending at the same time, even if you're a manga reader. But yeah, as, the Brotherhood obviously is my favorite anime. The manga bounces between number 1 and number 2 for my favorite manga. And, the first series, it's still like, top 50, which for me is still very good. So it's not like I dislike it by any means. It's just, they did the best they could with the pieces they were given, but it was never going to turn out as perfect as, the intention of what it was always meant to be.
But I will say that for the shared content, the parts that are covered in both versions, the 2003 adaptation does a somewhat better job, because it takes more time to build it up.
Yeah, this is...
introduce the characters.
Right.
Set up atmosphere. Brotherhood kind of speeds through that to get to the new content faster.
So this is like a huge chunk of my article, what I wrote about, because you inevitably, can't do a retrospective on when Brotherhood began without discussing the fact that, there was another anime series of this manga 5 years earlier, and everyone loved that, and it clearly shows that they just had an adaptation of it from the first core of it. So, yeah, as much as I like Brotherhood to stand on its own, it's definitely true that they rushed that early content to get to the new stuff as quickly as possible, because they knew that a huge part of the fan base that they were counting on to support this from the beginning had just watched this within the past 6 years, 5.5 years. So it makes sense at the time, and it wouldn't have gotten such a lavish production if the first series didn't come out and, hit so big. But it's unfortunate that, 10, 11 and a half years later, we can't just, look at Brotherhood as a completely perfect adaptation. Because it does have those spots in the beginning where, I think the 2003 series stretched out a little too much at times and padded it a little too much and had some, pointless filler that I could do without. But on the whole, yeah, there are definitely some major events that the first series taking its time with definitely benefited more than the Brotherhood adaptation. Now, that said, I feel like that is an opinion that is largely shared by the people who watched the 2003 series first. Because like I mentioned, I have introduced a lot of people to Brotherhood who have never experienced anything else Fullmetal Alchemist. And I hadn't heard complaints about pacing of the first core from any of them. And a few of them tried the 2003 series after, and their reaction was, wow, they're really slogging through that early material. So it's definitely, part perspective and part, perhaps the ideal adaptation was a middle ground between the two, and we don't have exactly the perfect version.
Yeah. I mean, thinking about it just point by point, it's not overly rushed, unless you're expecting it to move slower.
Right. And yeah, it's... Go ahead.
Because it conveys all the relevant information and doesn't get confusing.
Yeah.
And the beats land.
Mm-hmm.
And just not quite the same as with the 2003.
And I think, a great testament to that is what Cain just said about, how well established the world is. The fact that they were able to plow through that content in half the time, but not leave a new viewer like him confused or, feeling like they didn't do justice to their setting at the beginning, means that, yeah, they were extremely successful in making that work, even in a slightly smaller time frame than might have been ideal.
Yeah, I think they didn't
the world of Fullmetal Alchemist is both very easy to grasp, but also unique in its own way.
Mm-hmm.
It's, like most fantasy, it's based more on late 19th, early 20th century Europe. But with alchemy as the magic.
Right.
So I think some of the setting is what makes it so easy to get into.
Yeah, for sure.
For American viewers.
Absolutely.
Because we already have the cultural context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that definitely helps. Very Western setting, very familiar concepts. And just, a great show with the kind of, best execution of shonen tropes while also bringing in, like, very adult, mature themes that you don't get from a lot of shows of that kind. So it's a really good blend of kind of all the most entertaining material that you can have in a show like that.
Yeah, it didn't feel...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has its share of, you can tell this is a shonen manga moments,
Mm-hmm.
but good, you can tell this is a shonen manga moments.
Right, exactly.
And it's not like it ever becomes distracting or feels half-assed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the way...
It's just, if you like shonen, you'll like it.
And the way it's able to seamlessly blend that with the kind of concepts and storytelling that you normally wouldn't find in that kind of material is just incredibly impressive.
Indeed.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't feel... One of the things that I really liked about it as well was that it didn't feel cheap in some ways. Like, Kestrel, I just told you that Emily and I had started watching Violet Evergarden in German, which is cool. That's a different conversation in general, but there's the fact that even though everyone's like looks really good and beautiful and nice, there's still the lady with the way too big boobies in the very low cut dress, and it just felt really out of place. And I feel like Fullmetal Alchemist didn't really have that, so that's kind of what was refreshing about it as well. The characters are well designed. I didn't feel like I was being pandered to.
Yeah. I think being a shonen manga written by a female author definitely helped with the general lack of fan service as well.
Mm-hmm. The character designs in general are very memorable.
Mm-hmm. Very distinct style.
Male and female. They're distinctive without being overly exaggerated.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, when half the cast is wearing the same military uniform and you never have any issue keeping track of who's who, the sign of some great design.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, there's only really one person in the cast who is dressed provocatively, and there's a good reason for it.
Are you talking about Lust?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good reason.
Yes.
Literally,
characters...
the embodiment of lust is going to be a little more provocative.
And it's not even like, and it's not skeevy provocative either. It's like, oh, she's got big boobs and a low-cut dress.
Yep,
that's it.
Sexy rather than, hey, look, boobs.
Yeah, it's not pandering. It's just, the embodiment of lust is going to be a little sexual in her design.
Yeah. Who knew that lust would be sexual?
All right, Kate, I haven't let you give your spoiler-free recommendation or opinions on the series.
What hasn't everybody else said? I was gonna do that not pandering thing for obvious reasons, but that's been said, so now I don't know what to talk about.
It's fine to just agree with what's been said. That's
I
basically
agree with
do.
everything that has been said. It is just a really tight production, and it's a little bit of a shame that you don't get as much character build up at the very beginning. There's not a lot of space for like weird little incidental stuff. But Yeah, a lot of that weird, slightly awkward shonen humor kind of burns off very quickly at the beginning of the series, and because the series does hard shift into the main plot line fairly early on, and then from there it's just basically you are on this train heading towards this destination, which is funny because obviously when they adapted the manga for the first series, they just did it as incident, they started it off with basically incident of the week. You are alchemist. You go here, solve this problem, go someplace else, solve another problem. Yeah, that's very not what the show is.
Yeah, that's kind of some of the filler I was talking about.
Yeah, it's like, oh, that's cute. That has almost no bearing on the actual series whatsoever. It's like, oh yeah, you became a state alchemist, but you did it for a very specific reason, and as soon as shit hits the fan, it's go time. And it's go time from very early on until very late in the series. One thing I do like that the series does very well, which is all of the groundwork, all of the world building, all of the background, the motivations for the different characters, and the ultimate conclusion do not feel, for lack of a better word, Final Fantasy bullshit.
Hey now.
You know how you could be playing a JRPG and they just throw all this nonsense at you and you're like, none of this shit makes any sense whatsoever.
Yep.
It happens in a lot of manga too, where they're just like, oh, this, that, and the other thing. In anime too, which is the worst. Because they'll just be like this light novels. Oh my god. It'd just be this exposition drop and it's like, yeah, but this still doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. It gets into this happened, then this happened, and this happened, and this happened.
Yeah, but it still doesn't make any sense. And there's a very logical cause and effect in a place for this person did this thing, which led to this, which led to this, and now this has to be resolved. And it follows through, and you get a wrap-up of these conclusive elements by the end of the series.
I mean, I think a lot of that comes from how it all revolves around alchemy, which, for a magic system, is pretty grounded.
Mm-hmm.
And you can only change things you already have. You can't make something from nothing. And at a basic level, it turns one thing into another thing.
Yeah, and I think that kind of ties into what Cain was talking about before, where it has, very well-established rules and doesn't really break them. And yeah, you're selling this magic as science, but when it is grounded in basically, the law of conservation of matter, conservation of energy, it fits, it makes sense. And, also kind of tying in something that Cain was saying to something Kate was saying, it's impressive how well it's able to establish such a rich world without getting bogged down in that exposition. Because it feels like it's never really just wasting your time expositing, but somehow it's never confusing and you get the full breadth of this well thought out world that they're presenting to you.
And I think a lot of that is because every detail of the world has some bearing on the plot, not just background.
Totally, yeah.
And particularly in Brotherhood, and as it gets further in, without spoiling anything, because we're still in the spoiler-free, if it's discussing some detail of the world or the history, and it's not immediately relevant, you can bet later on it will be crucial to the plot.
Right.
Not just there for flavoring.
Yeah, and I've watched and read it so many times that it's hard for me to say for sure, but I feel like it never really drops something that you're gonna forget once it becomes relevant. Like it presents it in a way where once it matters, you remember exactly what had happened before, which is a great method of storytelling when you have these kind of plot points that become relevant later on.
Yeah, especially since Brotherhood excels at those big, dramatic, essentially holy shit moments. When it wants something to land, it lands hard.
It keeps things simple where it matters too.
Like it's big moments.
Thought, like it didn't get bogged down in explaining how their military infrastructure worked. It was just, this person was in charge of this guy who's in charge of this guy.
Yeah. And,
Well, they did the smart thing, which is just use normal military titles, so
Yes.
you could easily ascertain, like, this person's a colonel, this person's a
Right.
officer, you know.
and yeah, they naturally explain these things through not only that, but, characters will get promoted occasionally, and you'll see the relationship between subordinates and their superiors, the chain of command and all that. So, yeah, it all gets presented very naturally.
Yeah, because I know some shows can get really heavy into that terminology where you have to learn how their whole military works, especially when they start getting big into like German terms. Then it gets confusing.
Yeah, the only German term they really use is Führer,
Right.
which everyone knows.
Yeah.
Yeah, in general, the world doesn't have much in the way of terminology, and it's not immediately understandable.
hmm Yeah, a lot of...
There's alchemy, equivalent exchange, philosopher's stone, all pretty simple concepts as things go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then 3 major governing bodies that you have to be aware of, and that's like it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
3 major countries, or world powers, basically, so.
Right. And, they don't...
Yeah, but even then, aside from Amestris, the others are more secondary roles.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, there's-
Mostly focused on one country and one plot going through that.
And
Yeah.
and it doesn't, try to drop all this on you at the beginning. As things become relevant, you learn about them, so you're not overwhelmed at any point. And that's why it's so easy to pick everything up and remember it all as it goes on.
Yeah, and it doesn't keep things around when what's going on and isn't relevant to those.
Mm-hmm.
It's like for some of the supporting cast who might not have involvement in every subplot, I liked how it wasn't afraid to have them be off doing something else.
Mm-hmm.
Also, while it focused in on the main story,
That's a really good point.
Yeah, sure.
your specific aspect.
It's kind of like Star Trek does the same thing as a show. It didn't try to shoehorn all the cast members in on every single show. Sometimes you just wouldn't see them. So it can make the story flow of any particular episode be nice without having to be like, oh, there's X character doing something completely inconsequential. So that's a really good point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and even though Ed and Al are obviously the protagonists, it has a pretty good ensemble cast. Like, you can go a pretty good chunk of time without getting any specific character having screen time. And, you're just invested in everyone so well by that point that it still works.
Yeah, especially for the final act of the series. It does this thing that you see a lot in shonen where everyone is off doing something and it switches back and forth between them.
Mm-hmm.
It never felt like one was obviously the main plot and the others were the B plot, or one was more interesting. I still remember the first time I watched it, I found myself getting so invested in whatever was immediately on the screen that I almost forgot about everything else, because the individual plot line was so entertaining and so engaging.
And of course, they all eventually matter. They all come together in the end, and, nothing was a waste.
Well,
yeah. Like even the tertiary characters who you'd think would be just comic relief. They've had at least one moment in the spotlight.
Yeah, that's a better way to put it. I wouldn't say they were all important in the end. I've mentioned that to you, Kestrel, that it's some of the characters I felt got put on the back burner pretty hard, which is, unfortunate, but it's impressive enough with the size of their cast as is that they gave so many people prominent parts while not feeling like they were just giving them out for the sake of fan service.
Yeah. They didn't...
Nobody was completely sidelined. No one got Sakura'd.
They didn't, give a solid conclusion to every single character, but every character throughout the series was contributing to a major thread that was tied together in the, the final act. That's kind of what I mean.
Every character whose storyline really needed a solid conclusion got one.
Yeah, and then everyone else
and nothing was left hanging.
Supportive of one of those. Yeah, so, and also to mention something else that Kate was talking about, the comical bits in the beginning, I feel like it's been a while, but the 2003 series kind of eschews those, comparing the first, core of that to the first two cores of that to the first core of Brotherhood. Brotherhood seems a lot more wackier and more cartoony in those early moments. And that's pretty much keeping in line with the manga, which makes sense.
Gets into that super deformed manga-style humor.
Right, exactly, which Arakawa does, and definitely does a lot less as the series goes on, which is reflected in Brotherhood. But, in the first series, they kind of decide early on not to really do any of that, which I'm kind of okay with. I wouldn't have minded a little bit less of it in Brotherhood, but, of course, it didn't ruin anything by any stretch of the imagination.
Emily always liked it when Alphonse got super deformed.
The original.
That was her favorite.
I do like
she
that,
laughed every time.
Yeah. The original wasn't humorless, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, there were gags, but not as many of the manga style.
Right.
Ones. More like Mace Hughes talking about his daughter.
Yeah, totally.
Most of the running gags that they pulled from the manga were like regulated to like back pages or like like a one-off like gag strip at the back of the book or something.
Best of it was always the alchemic art that's been passed down the Armstrong line for generations.
Yeah, they have good character comedy without making the whole thing into a joke. It's just, these characters who you can take extremely seriously at sometimes, which is a great thing. No one's just a gag character, really. Maybe one or two
also
characters.
Eccentric.
Yeah, those characters are also eccentrics, which is great. It makes them more endearing. Yeah, and another thing, I agree with what all you guys have been saying, and I've been kind of, piping up here and there to agree with it in various ways. But one other thing that just had me thinking about was I feel like even with those comedic moments, compared to most other shonen series in general, it really lets the adult characters think and act like adults and not cater to a younger audience. So when they're, having a discussion and no children are involved, it sounds like adults are talking, which you don't always get in shonen. And, it touches on a lot of very serious topics, especially regarding the war and Ishval in general. A lot of real-world parallels. And all of that is just, incredibly maturely handled. And, even the characters in the show, they're all coming to terms with what they've been through, the adult characters in particular. And, they present it to the children without, any flowery speech to, pander to them or whatever. So I really like that aspect of it.
Yeah, getting into slight spoiler territory here, the Ishval flashback episode out of Brotherhood was one of the best.
Totally, yeah. And that was definitely in my head as I was saying that. But even some of the episodes where it's just like adults talking to each other, like, I can feel these people's trauma and their feelings as believable adults, not characters in a cartoon for, teenage boys. So I definitely appreciated that.
Yeah, I mean, even the goofiest of the adults, they're still adults who have been through some shit.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so I guess, do we want to say spoiler talk now?
Spoiler talk!
So anyone who hasn't seen the series, go watch it. It's available everywhere. spoiler topics that you guys want to delve into?
I have my one beef with Brotherhood.
Okay.
This is my one beef with the show. In the final end credits of the last episode, they give Roy a really stupid-ass mustache. He does not have that in the manga.
If that's your one beef, then that's the best endorsement I could
That
hear.
mustache is jank, though.
Oh, it's bad. I agree.
Yeah, and he did not get a bad mustache in the manga, so that is the one major deviation
If you're
from the source material.
If you're one, well, there are some changes. If your one beef is a few extra pixels on one frame in a montage of the end credits of the series, it's probably doing.
It's more than one frame, isn't he shown walking?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, it's a still frame. I mean, it's shown for a few seconds, but I think it's a photograph.
Yeah, just Mustang standing there.
Yeah, who told him that
with
shit
a mustache?
was a good idea?
You did,
No,
Cain, remember?
I said it sucked.
No.
Mm.
Okay, so Cain and I, we were discussing the series as he was watching it for the first time, and I was staying very tight-lipped. But at some point in that run, he was like, man, I wish Mustang would just get a mustache or something. His face is just so bare. He needs something there. And I was like, nope, I'm tucking this away for a few months from now.
It was when we were talking about...
Monkey's paw curls.
Yeah, exactly, a monkey's paw.
It was when we were talking about how your wife now thought Roy was really handsome and good looking, and I like Bradley. And my main reason for not liking Roy was his face was so plain. But I guess there's a lot of that in the show anyway, like tiny noses with lots of landscape that isn't taken up by anything. But yeah, that mustache blows. Not what I was thinking.
There's a lot of great facial hair in the series, though. Notwithstanding Roy Mustang.
It would work a little better if he had something under the lip or around the chin, maybe. But not that. I mean, obviously he puts work into it. Very well manicured.
Yeah, I'm glad that's Kate's one beef.
Bradley has a great
good
mustache.
Yeah, great.
Yeah,
Armstrong.
another one.
Mm-hmm. I'm not convinced he has a mouth. I think he talks through his mustache.
Well, in the flashbacks, you see him without the mustache.
Which is wrong.
It does seem somewhat wrong when you see it. It's true. It's like you cut off one of his appendages or something.
When characters
My head can't.
are defined or not defined by the facial hair they have.
Izumi's husband has a mustache too, right?
My headcanon is that his...
Izumi's husband has a mustache too, right? That's another one.
Yep. Sig. I mean, yeah, Armstrong and Sig are, the best of friends, of course, from the first moment they meet.
Mm-hmm. Their muscles talk for them.
That's right.
That's a pretty good endorsement of the show. If that's the only beef you had was a mustache at the very end. Mine was well, I have a couple. They're all pretty minor, really, in the grand scheme of things. But I didn't like how Winry's story kind of ended. From she gets sidelined real hard, and then she gets kind of devalued because Ed's just like, "How about you get an apple pie ready for us when we get back?" And I was like, that's fucking, you're a piece of shit for saying that.
See, that's fair, and I don't want to sound like I'm just defending everything, because it's true, it's totally true that Winry gets sidelined as one of the worst characters, especially for how big of a character he seems at the beginning. But at least in this case, the apple pie is literally set up from the very beginning of the series as I wanted to make an apple pie as good as Mrs. Hughes's so that I could, have Mr. Hughes try it. And then, with Alphonse being like, wow, that apple pie looked so good. That's one of the first things I'm going to eat when I get my body back. At least it had a reason, but I agree. She is not a strong female character. Fortunately, almost the entire rest of the female cast is.
Yeah, I just felt bad for her because she had her.
I mean, Hawkeye.
she had her kind of circle be complete with Scar, sort of, when she almost shoots him but doesn't.
Mhm.
And then after that, she just kind of gets like, and
Right.
that's all we need to hear from her, right? And then you don't really see her at all until she turns into like the weeping housewife eventually, and I just kind of felt bad.
Yeah.
And then, actually, I'll just pass it on because I can talk about my other beef later. I don't want to monopolize the time, but that was one of 3, I guess, maybe 2 really. But a third one is super minor as well. But that's probably the biggest one I had because I liked her a lot. I thought she was cool. And then she's just kind of sidelined.
Yeah, but I mean, for the time she's sidelined, that's also when in Hawkeye and Olivier, they get the spotlight.
Yeah.
Hate the most.
And I mean, May, Lanfan, like there are just so many
Oh,
great
yeah, for
female
sure.
characters that, other than Winry, are such badasses.
I mean, honestly, half the cast is strong enough to hold a show on their own.
Yeah, and there's a good mix of male and female among that.
I mean, let's put it this way. When we was a mechanic, there wasn't a hell of a lot for her to do in the plot, for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It was
Once
kind
you
of
got
disappointing
into
for her.
I'm gonna swallow God,
Yeah.
you don't really need a mechanic.
Yeah, it's true. And yeah, she's not a fighter, and not everyone has to be a fighter. I definitely agree that it's unfortunate that her role was so reduced for a lot of the later parts, basically the second half of the series, I'd say. Because it's true that, ultimately her greatest role for most of her last important appearances were contributing to Scar's story and his, journey for redemption.
He became an accessory.
More than anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is unfortunate.
Although I will say her conversation with Kimberly, the scene where they're in the Jeep,
Mhm.
even he mentions how much he respected her parents. That was still an interesting moment, a little more for him than her, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of things about her story were great, and later on, as time goes on, it's more how other characters interact with that and, the story about her parents than her character itself. So, yeah, it's a little reductive to her role, especially considering how prominent it seemed at the beginning.
And maybe I read it. Maybe I read it
At the very
incorrectly,
least,
but it also felt like in the end, like the very, very end, did she just become a housewife? Because I thought her big thing was she wanted to open up her own automail shop, and she was obviously super talented. But then it kind of felt like she just became the vessel for Ed's kids, and then he got to go and travel, and she had to stay home.
Yeah, there's probably some
and I
truth
was
to
like, oh, so
I don't
she's
recall
also diminished
all exactly.
here too.
It's been a
'cause
while.
She was on her way to being very sought after and successful automail talent, and then she gives up the prime of her life to sire his son, while he gets to go and travel and probably turn into an awful dad.
Absolutely, which is another thing we discussed, because all shonen heroes become awful dads.
Oh yeah, that's just par for the course. That if you are a shonen protagonist, you're going to be the shittiest dad ever.
and you probably had a shitty dad.
Yeah, exactly.
True. And I mean,
Or an absentee shitty dad.
right?
Yeah.
Like Hohenheim was a good
I mean-
guy, but he was an absentee father.
Yeah, he was AFK.
Right. Which, it makes sense. Like, shonen heroes tend not to have great family circumstances. Your mom's probably dead. Your dad's probably not around. So it's par for the course there. They didn't subvert many tropes in that situation.
Yeah, but I mean, still, Hohenheim himself was a great character.
Totally, yeah. And I mean, it's all justified. It's just, from the perspective of a little kid, especially when his mom dies, it seems like a shitty dad.
Yeah.
We really don't know what Winry did after the end of the series.
Yeah.
Aside from, them eventually getting married.
Yeah, I don't
She
recall
could've-
how much she was featured in the ending montage.
It is mostly
It's just
Mama Winry.
Yeah, it's a shot of them and their kids or whatever.
Right.
That's but that doesn't say anything other than, hey, they
Well,
reproduced.
she also says something
because
like, I have to let him
she's-
travel or whatever, which is very, I don't know. I was like, oh, so you're just allowing him to do what he wants.
Well,
But-
I mean, if she wanted to open a shop, she was going to be stationary no matter
Right,
what.
exactly.
So she probably is running a shop, and he's off doing alchemy or not alchemy bullshit, whatever the hell he's doing.
Yeah, nothing about his journeys really prevent her from doing that. And in that final shot, you do see Garfield right next to her, who's like her, automail senpai or whatever. So, I would believe that, no reason to think she didn't follow that dream.
I think that was the implication.
Yeah. It definitely wasn't clear, and it ties into the fact that she isn't featured much in the second half of the series. But you're right in a lot of those things. I agree with a lot of it. To defend it in one more way, with the crying at the end, that was another like full circle satisfying conclusion, because it ties into Ed saying the next time you cry it'll be tears of joy, and you have her hearing Alphonse saying that tickles when her dog is licking him, so realizing before seeing them that Alphonse has his body back, and just that slow walk over the music as she goes outside and just like silently glomps them, for lack of a better word. I thought that was a beautiful moment. Like, yeah, she's crying, but it ties into everything that's been brought up about, the tears of happiness and her subtly realizing that he had finally got his body back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm not trying to defend everything.
One of the other things I loved about the series was it had basically an entire episode for the epilogue.
Yep, absolutely. And I mean, even the final fight basically ended at the beginning of the second to last episode. So you had a little bit of like immediate wrap up there, and then an entire epilogue episode, which is great.
Yeah, because with that many characters and plot lines going on, you need to take time to make sure everything ends on the right note.
Yes, so many series are so concerned about, ending with the big final battle and everything that you lose out on those, the coda of your favorite character.
Yeah, but didn't feel like it lost out at all there. The final battle is so impactful when you're still feeling it through the conclusion.
Yeah, and a lot of the series is about more than just two people beating each other up, and when it is about that, it's beautifully animated and very creatively written with how it all works. So it makes sense that, the conclusion is going to be almost 2 episodes, certainly more than an episode and a half of, post-action material to really wrap up the stories, because it's much more about storytelling than it is about action.
Yeah, although it has plenty of action.
And beautiful action, for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing that they kept that kind of animation quality so consistent for so long.
Mm-hmm. Especially, and I was thinking about this when you were talking about the animation quality before too, but like the fact that it's been over 10 years since all of it has aired. And I remember when Cain was watching it, and he was like, man, this CG for Envy doesn't really look any worse than any of the CG coming out these days. I'm like, it's pretty on point.
I don't know if that's more impressive for FMA or more pathetic for the rest of the industry.
A little column A, a little column B.
It doesn't look great, but it's not dated looking either.
For sure, yeah. Yeah, this show looks like it was made yesterday.
Yeah, just think about the number of even one-core shows is where the animation crashes.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of any episode of Brotherhood that looked bad.
Yeah, definitely.
And some obviously had more highlights than others.
And I guess that's kind of another one of the things that makes Brotherhood look better overall, even in terms of animation quality, than the 2003 series, is that the 2002 series was much less consistent. It had a great aesthetic, and it had some really incredible feats of animation, especially with like action choreography. But it definitely had its lows that Brotherhood never has.
Yeah, the original excelled at design even when the animation didn't carry.
Yeah, agreed.
I actually like some of the designs for the original a bit more than Brotherhood.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. Although Brotherhood's kind of fit the tone and style more, or the looser designs work better for the flashier action scenes.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, so they were more
And
intricate in the first
I
one?
do think it's more consistent. It's less manga-y, if that makes sense. You could certainly look up the artwork, but there's more shading. It's
thicker outlines.
Yeah, less like focus on the line work itself and more gradients in between elements. So,
in a different color palette.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I do love about, and this is, the art styles are pretty distinctive between the two anyway, but one really easy way to tell which one it is, if you have a picture of Ed, I love how the people from Xerxes, or with blood from Xerxes, their hair was depicted as golden rather than blonde, and the way that they did that was that the actual outlines were yellow instead of black. So that's a super distinctive thing about, especially Ed's family in Brotherhood.
Yeah. This reminds me of something we haven't talked about yet. The openings.
Sure. We can talk about those all day. Cain, did you watch them?
Yeah. I don't have much to say about them.
Did you watch them, more than once?
Yeah. Actually, I watched them more often than not, but that was mostly because, during the opening is when I would refill my glass of water. Or something.
All right. I'll take
Savage.
it. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. 5 openings. The worst one is good.
Yeah, exactly. I always try to rank the 5 openings, and it's always impossible because I can't put anything at number 5 because I love all of them so much.
Yeah. I would say the second is the weakest for me.
What? That's my favorite opening in all of anime!
Really?
Yes. I love Nico touches the walls.
Yeah. I honestly can't decide between all the others. Because each one has something to add.
Now, are you talking just song, animation, both?
Both.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to focus more on song.
Yeah.
Just because that's how I am. But they excel in both regards.
Yeah. Especially that second one. God, I can't believe you don't like the animation or the song. Oh, I love them both so much.
The animation's fine, just the song isn't as memorable for me.
Yeah, that's fair. It's pretty standard J-rock, I guess.
You're gonna have to keep talking about it because I'm googling them now.
The song is perfect.
I liked one of them.
And they're all on YouTube.
I liked one of them in particular. I just can't remember which one it is. I think
now the second one, which is what we're talking about right now, is the one they played for the very last scene of the series. So that might be a little fresher in your mind for that. And you can't skip that. I hope you didn't skip that.
No. No, I didn't skip that. No. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also,
I just listened to part of the opening one. That wasn't it. That one was fine. It might be the same.
So you're fine? You're looking for one you didn't like?
I'm looking for the one that I liked, that I actually paid attention to when it was on, because I liked the song. It was more of a J-Rocky kind of one, so it might be the one you're talking about.
Yeah, the second one was the most straightforward J-Rock.
Yeah, but most of them after the first, I guess 2, 4, and 5 were all pretty standard J-Rock.
I wouldn't call 5 standard J-Rock.
I guess it's more of a ballad.
Yeah. I was actually surprised that they went with a ballad like that.
Yeah, kind of a bold
for
choice.
Such an action-heavy section, but it fits.
It does fit tonally because, it's about heavy emotions and it fits that really well. But it is kind of funny how it's definitely the most action-heavy core has by far the least flashy theme song, which and even, the ending of that is very mellow as well, of the final core.
Oh, it's the third opening.
It kind of reminds me of how,
it had funk.
Oh, the third one?
Yeah, I like that one a lot because it had that funky guitar. That
Yeah, I like
Oh yeah,
Tsukima
Gold
Switch.
Time Lover.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that shit slaps.
I like Tsukima
Yeah.
Switch a lot too. I think when I first saw the series, I didn't like that opening as much, and it was the first time I'd heard that band. But then, since hearing their work and other stuff, I kind of get the style, and I really like them now. They're one of my favorite bands now. They also
What else have they done?
So both them and Nico Touches the Walls, who did opening 2, have done openings and endings for Haikyuu. Tsukima Switch did, I believe, the first ending for Silver Spoon, which is appropriately another adaptation of an Arakawa manga. They also did a Space Brothers opening, I believe.
Huh.
Yeah, they've been around.
I haven't heard them in anything else, but I haven't seen those shows.
Okay. Yeah, they have a very
I'll have to look it up.
very unique style, and I like it a lot now that I've gotten used to it. And now I love that
Yeah.
Brotherhood opening as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's amazing that it's so that there's so many. They're so consistent. I
with
think when a lot of shows struggle to have one really memorable opening,
yeah.
Brotherhood has 5.
I will say the endings, like some of them I really love. The third ending, not a huge fan of. Like I don't hate it, but it's the one song from the series where I can be like, not a big fan.
Yeah, I liked 5
I
too.
do-
I like the 5th opening.
Mhm.
So yeah, 3 and 5. The others, whatever. Which, I mean, that's saying a lot coming from me, so
Sure, I'll take what I can get.
yep, you're gonna have to.
Yeah, and the theme songs, as well as, like Skyler mentioned before, the background music. I put a screenshot in our Slack channel today, but I spent the entire day of work just listening to all of the background music and theme songs on repeat shuffle. So I think I got through every song featured in the series twice throughout the day.
Nice.
Yeah. Great score. Great songs all around. That's the thing, like, above all else, just the fact that every piece of the production is just so good. It's not that it's my favorite soundtrack or the best animation or, the most emotional I've ever felt, but it excels at every component so well and works them together so well in a way that nothing else has that I've seen. Everything has some weak point, and that's what I don't really experience from Brotherhood.
Yeah, it's difficult to point to. Well, it has some, but there not as many individual moments that outshine everything else.
Yeah. Usually
But
it's like, one little plot point is a weak point. It's not like, an entire component that makes it up.
Yeah, it's like you said, just very consistent.
It reminds me of what one of my friends said one time about the movie Shaun of the Dead. I'm sure everyone's seen it. He believes that is the perfect movie. It is not the best movie. It is the perfect movie because it accomplishes everything that it hopes to accomplish while you're watching it. So it's not the best cinematography or the best soundtrack, but for what they wanted you to feel while you were watching it and what they wanted to display to you and have you hear and see, it nailed all of that perfectly. So he's like, it's not the best movie. It's far from like the best movie ever, but he thinks it's one of the only perfect movies. And I feel like that's kind of how I feel about FMA and how it kind of reflects what you said as well. Like, it doesn't have the best animation or the best soundtrack, but it just excels and is such a tight package of what it gives you as the viewer that it's almost perfect.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It's a good point. And, it also happens to have one of my favorite stories in the medium since, the manga doesn't have a lot of these things that we're talking about, but it's still my first or second favorite manga because the storytelling's so great, the designs are so great, everything is already really good, and then the production just kind of, pushes that up to 11 with really great soundtrack, really great animation, everything.
Indeed.
Yeah. What's the other manga it competes with on your list?
Berserk.
Nice.
Which, you can't give that an anime adaptation that lives up to its quality, because so much of it is just like artwork that would take a year to draw every frame of. However, that doesn't mean that we should have gotten the fucking bastardization that we did.
Yeah.
So we have my two favorite manga. One of them got the perfect adaptation, and the other got the worst adaptation possible.
Yeah, I think based off of what we've gotten for Berserk in terms of adaptations, you could have ended your sentence right away by saying, you can't make an anime for it.
But you could, and the first one was very good. It's...
Listen, I'm not hearing this
about
opinion
as good
again.
As you can do.
I'm not hearing this opinion about it again.
The first anime is excellent. It just can't live up to the manga. It's a little dated at this point, and it only covers a little chunk of the story. The next one, not so great. And then the most recent one is maybe the worst adaptation I've ever seen.
You know what's sad about that in particular for me? I looked at the covers of the Blu-rays, and that's some bitchin' art on the cover of those Blu-rays.
Yeah,
I feel like that's straight up false advertising. Someone's going to buy those thinking that's the product they're going to get when they put that disc or whatever inside their PlayStation, and they're going to be very disappointed. Because the art on the covers is fucking cool. Like, if I didn't know better, I would have been like, is that what this looks like?
Mm-hmm. That's what they want you to think.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're going to draw one piece of art, it's going to be for the cover.
Bastards.
The rest of it, they'll just use, whatever modeling program Kate just downloaded. So thankfully we got the opposite of that treatment for Brotherhood.
I mean, it was a guaranteed hit.
Mm-hmm.
And so Funimation probably figured might as well go all out.
Well, Funimation didn't have anything to do with that.
Oh, one last egregious thing about the Berserk adaptation, the recent one, is that somebody online had posted the last 30 seconds of the very last episode, which was all hand-drawn animated, and it looked fantastic, and at that point I just wanted to throw everything across the room. I was why?
There's a lot of really...
The hand-drawn portions look great.
Yeah. There's a lot of really tragic things about being a Berserk fan and an anime fan. Because, even if they do it right now, are they going to reboot it from the beginning again? Because if they're just going to do a sequel, then it doesn't matter, because you have to sit through that garbage, and it's not worth it.
I mean, I still like it because the story's enough to carry it for me. But yeah, your choices with Berserk are basically a PowerPoint or a PS2 game.
Just read the manga.
Or a Dreamcast game.
Yeah.
Manga's never going to finish.
That's fine. It's not like an anime adaptation would have a complete story. The manga hasn't finished. Of course, that's what you're going to deal with.
It'll finish when One Piece does.
Yeah.
One Piece is going to finish before Berserk.
One Piece will finish first, but it'll have several times as many chapters. Because Berserk is monthly to however he feels like.
One Piece is going to need 5 volumes just for the epilogue to wrap up every character's story.
Yeah. I mean, it's already nearing 1,000 chapters.
Yeah, right around the corner.
Not the longest by a long shot, though.
No, and I don't want to just talk about One Piece the whole time.
No.
But I feel like as far as...
We could do a different episode for that.
Yeah, which I'm sure we will. As far as, stories where you really need to have consumed every one of those 1,000+ installments, I feel like One Piece is about as long as it gets. Most of the ones that are longer than it are really episodic, and not all that much matters.
Mm-hmm.
One Piece, everything matters.
I got a question.
Yeah.
I got an answer.
Did Mace Hugh's death hit harder in FMA? Because I thought I was entirely underwhelmed by his death in Brotherhood. I talked to Kestrel about this. I was like,
yes.
I didn't give a shit about him in Brotherhood because he's on screen.
Well, that's a bit much.
Yeah. I'm being hyperbolic, but
right.
He's on screen for so little time, and then they give him a lot of the time at the funeral, and then you get the famous it's raining today. It looks like rain today scene. And to me, it felt just entirely unearned in a way, because
Right.
I didn't have any time to connect to him. All I knew was that he was in the military. He had a daughter they loved a lot and wanted to show people pictures of, and then the next thing I knew, he was dead.
That's exactly what
was-
the first anime excels at over Brotherhood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That
Hughes
and
was
the other shocking
Yes,
moment
yes.
in the beginning of the series.
Nina and Hughes are the two things where, Brotherhood kind of seemed underwhelming if you're used to the really amazing adaptation that they got in the original series.
Well, I was
'Cause,
also
yeah,
Hughes
subject
is
to the
around-
hype and the knowledge of seeing that like meme for years
Yeah,
of
Right.
Yep.
Mustang crying
Yep.
or whatever, and I knew that's what it was about. I knew it was because, like, I knew Mace Hughes dies going into it. Just
Yeah.
it was hard.
Everyone
Yeah, it's
knows.
hard not to know that. But I was expected to
Mace
be
Hughes and
more
Nina Tucker
emotionally.
Worst kept secrets.
Yeah,
Right.
that's very true. But I was expecting it to, I don't know, emotionally
Yeah,
hit
no.
me harder, and it just really didn't.
Well,
you're totally right. That's entirely from the first series and everyone who lived through that. Because Hughes was one of the main characters for 25 episodes in the first series.
Yeah.
Half
And
of the series.
Apparently, it was even that way for Arakawa. Like, the reason there was so much aftermath
Yep.
in Brotherhood in the manga when he wasn't in it a ton before is because so many people got invested in him from the first series that she wanted to do more.
Yeah,
I think because
that's
he's the
exactly
rare
right.
good dad.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, if you're a good parent, you're probably going to die.
Yeah.
his role in the manga was to serve as a catalyst for Roy.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And it like that his purpose was served. That was all the only reason he existed in the narrative. Yeah, and the first anime built him up as a important side character, or at least a very likable side character. And then it's like it's the other thing. It's like the Nina situation was another example of how alchemy can go horrifically wrong, and how hey, maybe you're putting too much pressure on these people to provide stuff for the whatever.
Is this the dog thing?
And it was just
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I thought, but I couldn't remember the names. Go on.
and that was a kick to push the brothers in the right direction, to show them this is not a path you want to walk down. They already knew pretty much, but then to see that, it was oh yeah, there are other people out there that are doing fucked up things for fucked up reasons, and
And to work in their relationship with Scar as well.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, big difference with that from the original Older Brotherhood was that the original gave it 2 episodes
Yeah, exactly.
instead of having everything happen in one.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, because that's, Arakawa, I think Kate said it really well. She didn't really plan for these to be the characters that you connect to. They serve an emotional purpose for various character arcs for the characters who do survive. But because the first adaptation had so little material to work with, and they stretched it out so much, they kind of maybe accidentally turned these characters into, characters that you're extremely invested in. And so you don't just get Mustang's reaction to Hughes' death, it's your reaction too, and the brothers' reaction. Even the first episode of Brotherhood, which kind of paradoxically for the purpose of the series is totally not in the manga, spends a lot of time on Hughes and introducing him to the brothers, and there's a lot of material added even within those early parts with Hughes. So what you saw in Brotherhood, believe it or not, is more than he appears in those parts of the manga. So yeah, he was not meant to be the character that you're the most connected with at the time of his death at all originally. And it's really just to serve Mustang's story. Just like, Winry unfortunately kind of becomes a person to serve Scar's story as time goes on.
Mm.
Yeah, because Emily even said that when I was watching Brotherhood. She's like, wait, he's dead already? I was like, yeah, he's dead already.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it only takes 10 episodes in this one.
Mm-hmm.
And Nina, I can't remember what 2 episodes they were number-wise, but, that's episode 4 in Brotherhood. And so, when DJ was entertaining the idea of watching Brotherhood, he's like, is it gonna ruin it that I know what happens with the girl and the dog? I'm like, well, that's episode 4 of 64, so probably not. And he couldn't believe that it was over that early. And yeah, it's because so much more time is given, and it happens so much later in the first series. That's what people care about and remember.
First series, it happened maybe 10 or 12 episodes in.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
And I want to say,
because there's a lot of filler before that point.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of, stories stretched out over twice as many episodes.
Yeah, because that was my second of third of 3 beefs with the series. Was just that. Like, I was disappointed by that. Obviously, it didn't really matter in the grand scale, because he just served Roy's kind of thing, and then the story just continues. So it's not like it ruined any part of the show for me. It was just, I felt like I was supposed to be sobbing, openly weeping in my living room. But
do you feel like that expectation or that disappointment came from having heard reactions to his character in the first series?
Probably. Just knowing the fact that he dies and that the internet ate itself when that happened. And then my wife had watched the original when it was airing with her friends in high school. And they got really into it. She told me they were really invested. And then when Hughes died, she was like, we talked about it for a whole week at school, and we were all upset about it. And then I was like, well, that's not what happens here. He's there and he's gone.
I think that's another situation where, if Brotherhood could exist in a vacuum, I think some of these areas of disappointment could be mitigated a bit.
Oh, absolutely.
Because, like I was saying, a lot of people's disappointment with how quickly the first core goes by in general is having experienced it in the first series, whereas the people like you who didn't have that experience didn't feel like it was super rushed. And the same thing, if you had somehow not heard a single thing about Hughes, which is probably the case for some of my friends who hadn't really watched anime before, they weren't in that community, so they didn't have any expectations. I think it probably hit them harder just because they weren't expecting it to be, this huge emotional moment. So I kind of wish it could exist in a void, but in that scenario, the first core would be a little bit more fleshed out anyway, because it's only so quick because the first series had just happened.
Yeah, and I mean, very few people can experience it in a void because it's so pervasive in the anime community.
Yeah, you kind of have to be not an anime fan, just someone looking for a good TV series to watch.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, everyone in the community has either seen it or heard most of the main points.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed.
But yeah, that's definitely a good point. This doesn't feel as impactful as I was led to believe what happened, and you're exactly right in assuming what happened.
He was a normie, right? He didn't really have he wasn't an alchemist or anything. He was just a dude.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was he
knives.
was like Riza. He was a really competent soldier, but he couldn't shoot fire or anything.
Yeah. And very smart. That was kind of his things. He wasn't the most physically capable. He was good. But it's really his mind where he excelled. And yeah, talking about the normies versus the magical beings that are alchemists, I like the way that it kind of pairs up the Armstrongs with the Curtises, because you have obvious parallels, but their alchemical abilities are reversed, where for the Curtises, Sig is the one without alchemy, and for the Armstrongs, Olivier is the one without it. I find that scene where they're all working together, fighting Sloth, to be a really good depiction of, how well they can use both the magical fighters and just the brute force fighters. And, Olivier isn't even just brute force in the sense that Alex and Sig are. She's just a fucking badass soldier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those two, Alexander and Sig are big old tanks, and she's like the DPS player. She's the damage dealer.
And I love that, in that scenario, you don't get big muscular women necessarily, but even though these are kind of traditionally attractive women, they kick at least as much ass. Even Izumi, without her alchemy and with her coughing up blood, kicks at least as much ass as the two giant muscly men next to them. I appreciate that.
I liked Izumi the best always, but I think it's mostly because she just called herself a housewife all the time, and I was like, that's the biggest slam on all the soldiers.
I love that.
Especially when she shows up to the North Base.
Briggs.
Yeah, Briggs. And I think she like goes into that little barracks area and like subdues those guys and then screams in the telephone, "A housewife."
That was great.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite moments because like you just dunked on all these dudes.
And I love the lore around her history in Briggs, where people around the base are just talking about this legendary woman who survived there and like beat bears and shit. And they're just like, "Yep, we know who that is. She's a housewife."
Does the manga ever talk more about what was really taken from her? Because it doesn't seem to really affect her other than she coughs up blood that is more often than not played comedically.
Yeah, I mean, it's her reproductive system, basically.
Okay, so that's what...
Which doesn't make any sense
at
all. Why are you coughing up blood? But, they needed some kind of weird shorthand that wasn't her bleeding out of her crotch, I guess, so...
I mean, basically the idea was Truth just ripped all those bits out kind of unceremoniously, and so, once Hohenheim comes along, he can rearrange shit a little bit so that doesn't happen anymore. But... yeah, it's basically just because her insides are, like, fucked up from that happening. But I think she certainly mentions a few times, like, my insides were taken from me and now I can't have children again, because it's the great irony of Truth, is that it takes away, what you most desire.
Did they ever talk about adopting?
I hope they do. I mean, I don't think they ever mentioned it, but it seems like a thing you should do at that point.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. By the end of the series, I was like, they should really consider adopting. I mean, there's going to be a lot of war orphans.
Yeah, it's true. Well, I would like to believe that's what happens at the end of their story.
That's going to be my headcanon. Is that they just...
I think it's fair to assume that.
I would think so. If they want kids that badly, eventually you would be like... You can adopt or do whatever and at least, raise some kids after the horrors of this war, which is another thing that Fullmetal does really well, too, that it kind of explores all of what a war is. It doesn't just glorify the violence of the soldiers. You see a lot of, like, the good and bad and how war can be kind of pressed on by bureaucracy and less about the actual soldiers' wills on top of that. I like how it wasn't just like I was watching Saving Private Ryan all the time.
Yeah, and definitely the perspectives of everyone involved on every side, and the tortured soul that is Scar, trying to come to terms with what he wants to do about the traumas he's endured, as well as all of the goofy, lovable adults in the series that we're soon reminded are, kind of war criminals. Like, they did horrific things as entirely war criminals. They did horrific things as alchemists to, innocent civilians in this Middle Eastern / Ainu kind of people in that kind of setting.
Yeah, the generically, like, this thing, what did I always think of them as? The Jewish Muslim Middle Eastern
yes, I knew
analog people, yeah.
Yes.
I think Arakawa's main inspiration was the Ainu.
Yeah, but
Probably, but I mean, that's her local oppressed, population of people. So that's what you're going to go to. Your indigenous, local, tribal, oppressed peoples that, every culture basically has one.
Yeah. Who have we fucked over?
And I think you can, kind of see some of the plot points as kind of like, prophetic or prescient for what happened in the Middle East after she started writing it. I think you can draw a lot of comparisons that probably weren't even intentional there, as well as like you said, the World War II analogs and Germany and the Jewish people. Obviously, for those who have seen the first Fullmetal Alchemist anime series, and especially its sequel movie, it goes very explicit into those themes. Not quite the vague symbolism we get here, but yeah, it's certainly an easy parallel with any of those situations, and just the fact that it parallels so many of them is a good reminder of how awful humanity is, because every culture does it. Every culture commits genocide. Hooray!
Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's part of what I was kind of alluding to with my earlier mentions about how it deals with war and these mature themes in ways that shonen manga often does not. And it's definitely, I think, one of the things that sets it apart so much as kind of, this perfect, unique, at least for its time, balance between great shonen manga and great adult storytelling. Because I feel like whether you're into, Dragon Ball Z or Cowboy Bebop, this is kind of your perfect middle of the Venn diagram of all of your interests intersecting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this gets compared a lot to, when it comes to war themes, Avatar.
Yeah.
A lot because of how they both handle the themes of war and dictatorships and the human toll that it takes, while still being able to market itself and be watchable by younger audiences. So it doesn't go into like so deep into like war crimes and territory that it turns into a Criterion Collection film. I'm trying to remember the one I was just thinking about that's coming on Criterion that's like one of the most gritty war films of all time. Oh, Come and See. That's what it is. Where it's like, oh, this will scar you for life. So it doesn't go that deep, but then it doesn't trivialize the actions either. Like you see real consequences, and both like on an interpersonal and like outer perspective for characters in both shows. Like whether it's the genocide of the Ishvalans and how that sits on Riza's conscience, or if it's the genocide of the Airbenders and how that affects Aang and how he perceives the world around him afterwards, considering he didn't know this happened until they showed up to the temple and, he sees it. So, yeah, they're both... I've seen them compared relatively often. I think they may have even aired at least at similar times.
Avatar was, 2005?
I think,
so
yeah.
It was in between the two adaptations of FMA.
Yeah, so they both existed in a similar time frame. So it's not like Avatar is from the 90s or something like that, or FMA is from like the 80s or whatever. They both... So I could see also why those comparisons would be made, because they both became pretty popular around the same area. So
and they're definitely, two of the finest examples of what you can do with, a younger demographic animated series storytelling.
Indeed.
Yeah, and I think what you were saying, the visceral impact of seeing some of these war crimes play out is definitely essential, but it's because of how it affects the characters going forward. We don't need to see a prequel of the bloodiness of the Ishvalan extermination. what matters is how it weighs on the characters and defines their characters and makes them all far more complicated than, just a good guy, because these are war criminals and they're trying to come to terms with that and do whatever they can to redeem themselves. And Scar is a victim who turned into a mass murderer, and he has to find his own redemption from that path and accept working together with the people who genocided his people. So yeah, very complex, difficult topics that are addressed very maturely.
Yeah, I like how FMA didn't shy away from it.
It's really fascinating how it introduces you to all these characters. There's like basically decent people. Oh, by the way, they're war criminals.
Yeah, totally. That's what I love. Like the adults, I don't feel like there are many adults in the series that are just like plain good guys. With the children, you can get away with it a little bit more, but with the adults, they've got some baggage, which kind of makes sense and makes them a lot more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it adds an extra layer, so you can't just point to like Mustang and be like, he's the paragon.
Mm-hmm. Because he totally would be if it weren't for that.
Yeah, if they didn't include that at all, he would be the overwhelming good guy that you couldn't help but cheer for.
Yeah, which is boring.
Yeah, it is pretty boring.
Yeah.
Granted, he does some stuff that would make you kind of like recoil from him eventually. I think, like, I really liked watching him torch greed over and over again, but I could definitely see how some people would kind of recoil from that because he just didn't stop and would not stop, and it's like, okay, he's not quite a hero anymore.
You mean Envy, right?
Yeah, sorry, Envy, not Greed. Greed is who, he dies later. Envy.
Mm-hmm.
Envy, whose death I actually felt the most in the whole series.
Like out of every single character, not just Homunculi?
Yeah, just about.
Interesting.
I think because his like, I normally don't like death soliloquies, but his felt more like most relatable, like someone who acts and pushes people away because he's jealous of what they can attain over him, even though he has so many advantages of being essentially immortal in a lot of ways. Like,
yeah,
he would live forever if he didn't put himself in harm's way as often as he does. And always acted so arrogant and haughty towards humans, but it came from a sense of like deep jealousy. And of course his name is Envy, but up until that point, unless you picked up on the context clues, you would think, oh, because people should be jealous of him or whatever. Or it isn't entirely clear that it's because he is jealous of basically the ability to feel emotion and to allow yourself to be vulnerable and to experience things like optimism in the face of adversity rather than being logical or succumbing to what feels inevitable. And he talks about that a lot. He's like, oh, you humans, so tenacious, it's annoying. When in reality, he was only saying that because he was trying to shield himself from the sadness of not being able to feel that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, I definitely appreciate that part of, my recording stopped for a second, so I'm just going to start that over. I definitely appreciate that part of his character in his final moments that, yeah, he's kind of one of the only homunculi that you don't get the source of their name at that point until the very end for him. And what you were saying about Mustang in that moment, I think it's entirely intentional that he's, kind of this bastard in that moment, because that's the whole point of that moment, of those two episodes, was that, he's letting his rage consume him. And having Scar there in particular to be like, you are becoming what I was. And I mean, I had the genocide of my people justifying me. You just got one friend, man. You don't quite have it as bad as me. And here I am working with you guys who killed my people. So if you can't, let yourself be human again and let someone else take your revenge for you, then you're kind of screwed. So yeah, I definitely appreciated that moment because Mustang obviously had this baggage from his past of being in this war, and then he was pretty much, the good person with power throughout the series. So to see him succumb to his rage and have the potential of becoming this irredeemable villain, I think just further makes him a complex and interesting character in that moment. Because, yeah, him and Scar maybe are the two most complex characters in terms of their highs and lows of, terrible acts and really heroic acts.
Do you think there was any connection with Mustang losing his eyes briefly and the fact that he just kept targeting Envy's eyes over and over again?
Yeah, there could be some irony drawn from there.
Maybe. I just thought about it right now because those are some of my favorite parts when he was torching Envy was like, oh, you could just take his eyes all the time. Like, that's badass. Really scary. But
yeah, especially hearing him talk about, like, bubbling the liquid in his eyes.
Yeah. I was like, oh, so this is where this is going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and, I mentioned it before, but I do really appreciate the ironies of what truth takes from each person, and, they lay that out in pretty plain terms near the end of the series, but I feel like it's no less effective for how it's handled.
Indeed. Did anyone else?
Had you gone over all your problems with it?
There's only the third one, which is really minor, and it's something I don't like in general. It's not a criticism of the show itself. I don't really like death soliloquies, and I didn't.
Right after you were talking up Envy's.
Yeah, like I said, I normally don't, but I emotionally connected to Envy's. And I felt a lot of sympathy and pity in that sense, but I did not like Bradley's. And I think mostly because I'd heard Bradley kind of talk about all that shit already, in a way.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, I picked my wife, I did this, I did that. And especially because I wanted Lan Fan to kind of get her vengeance, in a way. And she didn't let him talk out of a sense of, like, at least I thought, you're too, like, low from my vengeance. She definitely wanted to kill him, and Bradley even said it. Well, you let me talk, so now I'm just gonna die. Everything leading up to that was awesome. Him, like, losing his arms and then stabbing Scar with, like, catching that shit was badass. But then I just had to sit there and watch him kind of wither up and talk about his family when I already kind of knew most of that was going on. I wanted Lan Fan to, like, it would have been perfect for me if Lan Fan would have let him start to talk and then she, like, decapitated him. That would have been fucking sick.
Is it safe to say Bradley was your favorite character? He's certainly the one you talked about the most.
Bradley's my favorite villain out of all the villains. I don't know if he's my favorite character. I'd have to think about that a little more because there were so many cool characters. But I like Bradley's fight style the most.
Yeah. Like I was mentioning before, especially with, like, some of the female characters, there are just so many characters in the show that their fighting style could be the highlight of any other show. And there are just so many of them. Bradley, Lan Fan, May, who's an adorable little girl. Like, so many Izumi, just total badasses. Mustang, Jesus, especially against the homunculi. I think episode 19 with Mustang versus Lust is, like, right up there with the second to last and third to last episode of the series as my favorite episodes of the series, which I'm glad is so early on, because, like, if you tell someone to make it 19 episodes, that's a pretty easy sell. And I feel like if you make it to episode 19 of the series, there's no way you were stopping. Love that episode.
Yeah, that was a favorite of mine too. Yeah, I could probably say Bradley's my favorite character. I was thinking about it while you were talking and listening, and I can't really think of another character that I had a good enough reason to put over Bradley to like be like, oh well, this character is better than Bradley because X. I didn't really have that, so I'd say Bradley's my favorite. If even if it is for entirely superficial reasons, like his mustache, his fighting is cool. I like how he got blown up in a train and came back from being blown up in a train. Like,
yeah,
and how he's so like masterfully kind of used Ed and Al as his pawns in a way. Like, he was a good villain in that he wasn't just using physical enforcement to enact his plan. Like, he was also very intelligent.
Definitely. Yeah, he's a very likable character for all those reasons, just as a really badass villain. And something else you mentioned about, like, Lanfan getting her vengeance, something that I've definitely felt as I've gone through the story is that a lot of the homunculi, there are too many characters who deserve to be the one to get the vengeance. So I guess it's kind of appropriate that, like, you know, Bradley, Wrath, and Envy in particular probably have the most people who deserve to take their heads. So it's kind of appropriate that both of them have a bunch of fights with a bunch of those people that wear away at them, and then they kind of go out, I wouldn't say on their own terms, they don't want to be dying, but Envy crushes his own Philosopher's Stone, and then, you know, Bradley withers away. But, like, you want Lanfan to take her revenge on Bradley.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I wanted that
you
so
want
bad.
Scar, like, Scar has more reason to kill Wrath and Envy than anyone. Like, yeah, Mustang is super mad about Envy killing his best friend, but Envy was the instrument to kill Scar's people again. Like, yeah, this dude, Scar, killed a bunch of good people, but man, he sure had the worst of it back in the day. So he didn't really get a shot at Envy, and he probably deserved it more than anyone. And he deserved it for Bradley, and he deserved it for Father, because he ultimately orchestrated the whole thing. So yeah, all of these characters have done such, especially the major ones, have done such terrible things to so many of the characters that we grow to care about. You kind of want them all to get their vengeance. And so I guess it makes sense that it's like, you know, everyone in the battle at the very end.
I'd like to mention something because we keep bringing up Mustang frying lust over and over again. Man, Travis Willingham had to kill his wife.
Yep, there's some great irony to that.
Oh man, that could not have been an easy voice acting session, depending on who recorded first.
I mean, they're actors.
I know, but still, I can only imagine.
It could have also been pretty cathartic if you think about it.
Also, there's like, you know, a little bit of sexual tension in that battle to the death. Lust is obviously, you know, a seductress, as she should be, and, you know, her final line is like, yeah, I'm glad I died at the hands of a man like you. And, yeah, you know, there's a little bit of that. Something I was also thinking of, you know, we were talking about Envy, how he embodies Envy, really only becomes clear at the very end. A lot of them are much more clear-cut. But the way that Cain kind of sympathized with Envy and his, you know, eponymous Envy, I was thinking about that as well because, you know, I am very introspective and self-psychoanalyze a lot. And it's one of the kind of character studies of myself that I like to do is think about the 7 deadly sins and rank them, because that's another thing I like to do, in terms of how much each of them applies to me, as far as my perspective anyway. And envy is always a very clear number 1. So any time I can, you know, connect with a character feeling that, you know, emotion, that sense of jealousy for other characters, especially, you know, an inferiority complex, anything of that sort, that resonates with me very deeply. So I kind of got the same sense of that from Envy with his death, and the sense of how envious he really was of everyone else. And I feel like that, above all other sins, that's the one that's most deeply tied into like your emotions and the easiest to resonate with and find empathy for. Right. So I'm curious if the rest of you have an idea of what sin you embody most, and if that correlated to your opinion of that homunculus.
Oh, man.
It's a very easy ranking for me, because like I said, I've thought about this a lot. So it's like envy, greed, pride, sloth, gluttony, wrath, lust. Very easy list for me. And, you know, some of them are reflected more than others, but yeah, the fact that envy is so far up there and such an emotionally resonant emotion, kind of redundant there, but, you know, a very resonant emotion, that really helps me empathize with that sensibility.
Yeah. I didn't really have that experience. Like, for me, it'd probably be sloth, because I'm more of the lazy type.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the homunculus who really stood out to me the most was Greed, just because he's a great character all around.
Totally, yeah.
And yeah, Envy's death was also surprisingly impactful for such an easily hateable character.
Yeah. It's just a great strength of the series. Like, not only the characters like Scar, who are introduced as villains and, you know, grow to redeem themselves, but just the most heinous monster for the entire series, right up until the moment of his death, which should be so cathartic. And then you're like, shit, man, this is kind of getting to me. It's great. Great character writing. But yeah, I agree that Greed is probably like the most likable homunculus, probably is given the most depth overall throughout his character. He's the one who's allowed to break away and, you know, kind of is two characters, and then is allowed to become a hero. So yeah, he's a great character in both iterations.
Yeah.
His power was cool too.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to get that like impenetrable shell up, that was dope.
And I really like the way that you know, his relationship with Ling develops. How they kind of meld into you know, somewhere in between the two, and they work together in that sense. It's not like they're fighting for control of the body anymore. They just become collaborators within a single vessel, and you get to see, you know, Ling's badass martial arts skills along with Greed's, you know, ultimate shield homunculus ability. So those are some great moments as well.
I think the only homunculi death that I felt was like cathartic and fun to watch was Salem's Pride's, because I could watch that all day, every day.
Yeah,
I like watching him get that burning finger shit, get his head just crushed. 'Cause, yeah, Envy's I felt sympathy for. Lust's I didn't really feel impacted because it happens early, so
yeah,
she's still.
I feel like that's cathartic, though. No,
it was cool. It was cool. Yeah,
it was very cool.
It was cool, but it was too early for me to be like, oh, she's so bad, I want to see her get defeated. To me, when I was watching, I was like, it's a monster of the week kind of death, because it did happen early when that was kind of a thing that was happening. And then Bradley's death was more disappointing than anything, because I wanted Lan Fan to wreck him. But yeah, it was Pride's death I could watch over and over again, even though technically it wasn't a death, it was just a defeat.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah, that's another thing that I kind of wanted to bring up that you and I talked about.
What is up with that?
Yeah, this was something that I feel like could be pretty conflicting for people's opinions of, you know, the last few episodes, is the fact that they let Salim live, and it's like, little weird fetus Salim that Cain was joking that they feed with an eyedropper until he grows into, younger boy Salim.
How else are you going to do it?
A few years. Yeah, it's super bizarre and, like, kind of concerning. So I'm curious what people's thoughts were on that, too.
Yeah, I don't know why they bothered, but
it's definitely strange.
Maybe
and,
they wanted to
one
go
of
with,
the least explained things.
Yeah, maybe they wanted to go with like a rebirth of the homunculi to show that they aren't inherently evil. So why not pick the one that was a little kid the whole time, and in a lot of ways the most evil, at least in terms of personality and plotting. But yeah, I didn't get it. I was like, I would have been fine if he just died too. Really, especially because it sounds like they're ready to kill him at a moment's notice anyway.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, wasn't it like kind of like if you even so much as like hint that you're evil, still evil, it's like you're gone.
Yeah.
Like, just stay out of the sunlight, because as soon as we see a shadow under you, we're fucking putting the sniper to you.
Yeah, which is the right call. But one that, maybe they just wanted to give Bradley's wife, like, some semblance of a normal life, even though there's nothing normal about this whatsoever.
Yeah, not even a
Yeah,
little.
I know. It was like, sorry we took your kid who's not really your kid away. Here, you can have him back. Oh, by the way, he's a tadpole now.
Yeah, aren't we all?
And does he not have, does Salem not have necessarily any memories from that? Because it seemed like...
It doesn't seem like it.
Yeah, it seemed like depending on what
That
happened...
was the implication.
Yeah, because Greed had to unlock the memories of the past abuse after he was kind of reforged.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like if you reduce the homunculi so far down to their base form, they lose memories of past hosts and past experiences.
I mean, it was a different situation anyway, because, like... And also, with Greed, Father took him back into himself as, like, Liquid Philosopher's Stone, and then birthed a new one, and those memories were locked away. But then with Gluttony, when Gluttony's almost dying, he takes his Philosopher's Stone into his body and says, I'll recreate you with your memories intact. And, Gluttony's kind of an idiot, so what good are his memories? It's pretty much just, you killed lust, I hate you.
I'm also hungry.
I'm also hungry. So that also a great piece of irony that Gluttony gets eaten. But yeah, the whole memory thing, it seems to be up to Father's will when he's in control of recreating him. But with Salim, with Pride, he didn't like become a Philosopher's Stone and then get reborn from that. He just became little weird tadpole fetus Salim. So I don't know. It's definitely one of the least explained parts of the series. And it's weird because, like, they were keeping everything about Pride and Wrath from Mrs. Bradley right up until it seems like the moment that they gave her her tadpole son. So I feel like they must have explained something at that point.
I mean, how do you even bother to explain it? I think you'd be better off just being like, you should take care of this.
Because it's an interesting... Sorry, go ahead.
The only other I was going to say, is that also where Salim is just going to stop growing? And he's going to be a kid forever? Because it was different when he knew that he was a homunculi and he knew he'd be a kid forever because it wasn't his pure form. But if his memories are kind of wiped, he's going to start asking questions when he's 26 but still has the body of a 6-year-old.
Yeah, and I mean, he developed from tadpole to 6-year-old pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But it was, 6-year-old, not like, I don't know, 9-year-old Salim that we were used to in his normal Pride vessel. So, yeah, I'm not sure if he just had a real quick ramp-up period at the beginning, and then he's gonna slowly grow from that point, or what.
I don't know. It was some Hotoro Sailor Moon bullshit.
It was very, very confusing. And, yeah, it's hard to tell exactly what Mrs. Bradley knows at the end, because, when she's talking to Grumman at the end there, she's still, like, talking about her late husband in a positive light, but is clearly aware at that point that her son was a monster that they're going to kill as soon as he does anything, suspicious. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on with that. I feel like it could have used a little more explanation, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter.
I chalked it up to that she was just voluntarily suppressing some of that knowledge so that she could not herself maybe go insane that she was married to two people who wanted to genocide an entire nation.
And, her child was the worst monster of all. Like, what mother wants to hear that?
Yeah, I think she knew. I think there was definitely a level of knowledge there, and she was just keeping her head down because she had no other choice at that point.
That's what I would assume, yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
It's like, here's your choice to make amends for raising, like, Satan. You now have to make sure that it doesn't happen again. Here you go.
Yeah, and, going into your mention about the Curtises adopting later on, there are a few things that you've brought up over the course of this discussion and over the past few months that makes me want you to watch the 2003 series, because they kind of take some of the thoughts that you've had and expound upon them in ways that the manga and Brotherhood does not. So, yeah, I think it would be interesting if you check that out at some point down the line and see what they do with some of these concepts that were given to them without a conclusion.
They get that creative freedom.
And I mean, you could say the Curtises kind of, had the Elrics as adopted children for a little bit there. But yeah, as far as a full adoption, having a child of their own, the other series does something interesting with that.
Do they get a dog? I bet that's it, right?
I will say the 2003 series probably makes the homunculi more interesting overall as complex, troubled characters more than villains. Whereas I think Scar gets less of that. So their roles are kind of reversed. Yeah. It does a lot of interesting things with its ideas. I agree with Skyler. The ending isn't great. The sequel movie, I would say, don't bother with. But it definitely does some interesting things with the material it has to work with.
Yeah. And, it's still a great show in its own right.
Yeah, totally.
And it just has some issues.
Mm-hmm.
Largely come from adapting a manga that didn't finish for 7 years.
And,
which one's
as far as... so this
Conqueror of Shambhala.
Okay, that's what I was thinking. I remember Kestrel, you said it. That's a weird one.
Yeah,
I didn't dislike it. Didn't really address any of the issues I had with the original.
Mm-hmm.
Well, didn't make it any worse.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with Kate's here. I would definitely say the series as a 51 episode TV series stands on its own better than if you include Shambhala. I still think it's a good movie, but I think it detracts from the quality of the series because it makes some choices that I just really can't get behind. And it, just further goes into the territory of what made the first series weird and so clearly not what the series was meant to accomplish when it started out. So yeah, that's Conqueror of Shambhala. And then Sacred Star of Milos is the other movie. And some people consider that like a Brotherhood movie, but really I think it fits into either canon just as easily. It's pretty separate from the main plot. It's like, I would say
like
that...
a typical shonen movie.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. And, that's not something you'd necessarily expect from Fullmetal Alchemist. And I think you're right in assuming that because it does not have anywhere near the level of sophisticated writing that anything else in the franchise has, to the point that I'd say it's not really worth watching. Like, there's some interesting animation styles in it, but I don't think the writing is worth checking out at all, especially if you have the expectation of, how great every other iteration of Fullmetal Alchemist has been.
Yeah, I'm glad to know I don't have to delve into any of those movies to find some new content. Yeah, sometime I'll check out the 2003 series to see where it kind of expounds upon those. I can't say when because there's so many other things. But
yeah, that's fair.
But it's cool to see that they had that time to kind of explore those a little bit. Because I'm always a big fan of character like development, even if it's dumb shit.
Yeah, like Lust, probably the weakest homunculus from a character writing perspective in Brotherhood, easily the strongest in the 2003 series.
Wow, complete 180.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting.
And something that Skyler said a minute ago, for the situation that they were in where they had to adapt this material up to a certain point and then make up their own ending, I think Fullmetal Alchemist, the 2003 series, probably still stands as the most successful attempt of that anyone has ever made. Normally it's like, okay, yeah, then they get to the filler ending and everything just falls apart. But even for all its faults with how it doesn't match up to what the series was set out to do, it's just so well done with the ideas that they come up with and the dots that they choose to connect. That, yeah, it's incredibly impressive. The fact that it's not one of my favorites still is only because, they had this shitty situation to work with.
I always thought Claymore's anime-only ending was pretty good. Granted, I read the manga then, and I was like, oh, it had so much more. There was so much more.
Yeah.
Yeah, Claymore was like, okay, but it was obvious just from watching it that there was so much more.
Oh, yeah, it just fucking blows up.
That's one of the biggest problems with a lot of these situations is it's obvious that there's so much more. So what the 2003 series does well, even though it doesn't offer a satisfying conclusion to all the plot threads that Brotherhood does, is at least it gives you conclusions by taking these incredible liberties with the plot points and weaves them together in a new way to get to some sort of an ending.
Indeed.
And yeah, what you were saying about, I don't know how long it'll be before I get to that. I think that's probably for the best because, like I mentioned, the people I know who watched Brotherhood and then immediately watched the 2003 series, they had it even worse than the people who did it in reverse. Because the people on the other side of that were like, yeah, I just saw this material and it's kind of rushed here. That's still way better than, I just saw this material and it's taking up twice as long now and with a bunch of pointless filler, and it takes up half of the entire series now. So definitely if you watch Brotherhood first, give yourself a good few months at the very least before you check out the 2003.
Indeed. For me, that's about all I had to say about it, so I'm going to leave the floor to anybody else. I got my 3 complaints out of the way.
That's fair. I fought them all, but I also understand them all.
Yeah.
And really, it's for a series that long, and I only end up with like 3 things that really bother me. That's more of a testament because I watch everything very critically. Like, I tend to take a cynical mindset towards almost everything I watch, where I almost look for stuff to criticize rather than enjoy it for better or for worse. Sometimes, there's other things that I don't because you can't, because it's like a cult hit like Rocky Horror Picture Show. If you look for everything that was wrong with Rocky Horror Picture Show, you wouldn't have a movie. There'd be nothing there anymore.
That's the truth.
So some stuff can pass that sort of critical eye that I always turn to things. But to have a show that's 64 episodes and that's the best that I could really come up with is just a testament to the quality in and of itself.
Yeah, and we all write about these things. Of course, we're going to have a critical eye, and I think that makes us appreciate great storytelling that much more because we're really thinking about it and all the things that could go wrong and, how it subverts that and manages to pull off incredible feats of art and entertainment. And yeah, to only have 3 complaints. And can you just recap those?
It's Bradley's death. Bradley's death and denying Lon Fon's vengeance. He was his death and its lack of emotional impact compared to the hype and how it's handled in the first series. And then the other one was just I didn't like what happened to Winry at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I feel like kind of the common thread is that these all kind of boil down to some level of disappointment from just expecting a little bit more. And that feels like, partially, yes, this could have been handled better, but definitely also a testament to, how much expectation a series this good will give you for every little plot thread. And, you could have had 100 other disappointments at that level because of how many different plot threads and character arcs there are, and the fact that it was only those three. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good sign.
Yeah, it could have easily fallen apart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it didn't, and it's good, and everyone should watch it.
Yay! I'm so glad that my experiment with Cain ended with exactly what I wanted to do. So yeah, if you've listened this far, I sure hope you haven't gone without seeing the series, because we just spoiled a bunch of stuff. But I hope this was a good discussion for those who have seen it, and maybe the people who got into it from listening to our first part, which I hope exist, will listen to this part afterwards and appreciate some of the discussion. So any parting words?
Watch it.
Yes.
Watch it.
For our recommendation section, we all recommend you watch Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood.
Yeah, and then maybe write to the powers that be to release an affordable Blu-ray set.
Yeah, that's fair. Throw some ads at Aniplex USA and Funimation. Tell them to put something together for that.
Please.
But at least for streaming, it is available virtually everywhere.
Indeed.
All right. Anything else?
No, I'm good to go.
Nope.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So I hope this got slightly outside of our normal listener base and introduced some more people to us. So if you want to hear more from us, please find us everywhere you find podcasts, subscribe, rate, and review. We are on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio. We have an Alexa skill. We are on YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher. You can find posts with our episodes as well as writing from each of us on fandompost.com. You can find us on Twitter and Facebook at fandompostradio. Please follow us there. Let us know what your opinions were on Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. If you have any points of contention with anything we said, let us know. And you can also give us any of that feedback via email at fandompostradio@gmail.com. Yeah, I think that covers everywhere you can find us, and you can find me on Twitter at FullmetalKilma, appropriately. It is Fullmetal, and it has a picture of Edward for the avatar.
You can find me here exclusively.
Yeah,
And
boy.
I don't have a picture of Edward, but I did for a while have Hachikin as my Discord profile, which is from the same mangaka and everything. So there's that. They look similar.
Yeah, same face.
You can find me on Twitter at SonicBug. I don't have an avatar of anything on there except for a badly drawn picture of myself. In other places, I use a different homunculus from a different series as my avatar.
Ooh.
Except on Fandom Post, I think I'm a picture of Excel. So
Yeah.
she is not a homunculus, as far as we know.
You can find me on Twitter at VideoGameP3. I have a picture of Revokave from Steins Gate doing a Hoenn Kyoma pose.
Also an excellent avatar. All right. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks everyone for being here and letting me gush about my favorite show for 2.5 hours.
Happy to.
You finally got us here. You did it, Kestrel. You finally did it.
Hooray.
Your life's work is completed.
See?
Now try to get DJ to watch it.
Well, that's the hope. I'm going to make him listen to the first part of this episode, hopefully. All right, everyone, tell your friends who haven't seen the show, listen to the first part of this episode, and watch the show. And we will see you when we have other stuff to talk about.
Indeed.
In the future.
Adios.
Ciao.
See ya.
Yeah.